share some thought-provoking remarks with you. So I help to run an independent Pan-Asian think tank here called the Global Institute for Tomorrow. I am the first to admit that I am not an AI technical expert, but we've worked with many large organizations and government departments over 20 years in transformation and organizational development and in leadership development to shift mindsets and behaviors in relation to the formative changes in the external world. So I think, of course, this whole notion of artificial intelligence or AI is causing a lot of grief within companies who are trying to figure out how to use it. I actually like to think of AI not as artificial intelligence, but as alien intelligence. And therefore, then, the challenge for humans is how to manage and communicate and interact with an alien intelligence or a synthetic intelligence. And that is not something that we've been trained to do. It's not intuitive for many of us. So my talk today is on governance, transformation, and the future of work. I have reframed this to focus on governance for human good. I think many of you will have joined sessions, understanding governance from data security, privacy, mitigating risks, etc., and the whole system of decision-making processes, etc., in order to do that effectively. In fact, yesterday, the Commissioner for the Security Bureau and Protection of Critical Infrastructure gave us, I think, a very clear directive on governance to protect critical infrastructure assets and consumer protection. I'm going to shift gears and argue that the biggest challenge for companies and for leadership in an AI era, remember, alien intelligence era, is how to manage for human good. And when I talk about human good, I'm going to go through three levels. At the highest level, it is society and the external environment and all of the customers, partners, stakeholders in society that are affected by AI and our use of it. That, of course, foremost is a policy discussion. But how businesses react to that, how they accept or push back and form that, and indeed, because many commercial organizations are actually more influential than governments, it has a bearing on society. But at the more immediate level is teams and culture within organization, and at the individual level, how to govern for human good. So how many of you actually are aware of the new the new encyclical by Pope Leo that was released about 3 weeks ago? Anybody seen this document? No one's seen this document, so I won't even ask if anyone's read this document. But if you are interested in AI governance, I highly recommend checking out this document. And by the way, I am not a Catholic. So I'm not saying this because I am religiously advocating for the Catholic Church, but I can tell you that it's probably the most expansive, visionary, and important document that's been released about AI in recent times, maybe ever. So in this document, of course, it lays out great historical sweep around technological change and the church's position on social doctrine to preserve and protect common good. So again, I would argue at the highest level, how we govern alien intelligence relates to our understanding of the common good. Now, I was talking with a friend, I did a session with our friend from Microsoft yesterday, and we were talking about the differences in AI policy in Europe, in the United States, in China, and in Hong Kong. So I said, let me just do a little piece of research comparing the policies of those jurisdictions. And I said it would be interesting if we compared this to what Pope Leo has written. So over breakfast, this is a little bit small, but over breakfast, I asked my friend Manis, do you all know Manis? I asked my friend Manis to produce a comparative document of the different policy, the formal policies, and I said compare it to the encyclical put out by Pope Leo. And then it generated this website for me. And if you're interested in this website, it's a public website. I can send it to you, it's no problem. But it has a feature where you can actually compare, point by point, the Pope's encyclical with Hong Kong policy and US policy and Europe policy. So it's very interesting. And of course, I'm no technical builder, but these kind of things are, of course, very possible now. And it really gives us a sense to say how to use these tools to foster expansive and critical thinking. And you can see that even here, it goes through things like the concentration of power and oversight and accountability, social controls and surveillance. And it's actually very interesting to look at things in this way. So what are the issues in society that we need to be aware of when we talk about governance? Well, typically, you will think about applications for e-commerce and shopping tools and agentic applications for banking and consumer services. And that's fine on the level of industry and commercial applications. But there's many other uses and applications for this alien intelligence to support the foundations of a resilient society. For example, food security, disaster preparedness, healthcare, particularly inclusive healthcare for those who lack access. And when we work on this at our institute, we have long argued that technology should be understood as a problem-solving tool. If you believe that technology is a problem-solving tool, then the question is, what problem are we trying to solve? Are we trying to solve the problem of making e-commerce more seamless? Or are we trying to solve food security, natural disaster preparedness, human well-being, etc.? Again, high-level policy discussion, but something for business leaders to think about. Now let's go a little bit more granular because transformation in organizations for governance for human good, the first order of thinking is really for teams and organizational culture. Now, it would be no surprise to many of you that actually Hong Kong, very sadly, suffers from an epidemic of mental health issues. And there's many reasons for the mental health crisis in Hong Kong, which is multifaceted, which is socioeconomic, which relates to living space, crowded conditions. But one of those is also overwork, long working hours, and low morale within teams. So if you're governing for human good within organizations, you really want to think about what kind of organizational culture and team morale you are able to foster with the whole system of decision-making systems, processes, and incentives. Now, how do you create culture? A big part of that is communication. We're communicating with people, and now we're communicating with bots, with machines. And for any power users of AI, any power users of AI in the room? Come on, put your hands up if you're a power user. Then you might know, and I have realized this, a nice framework to think about is if you get really good at communicating with machines, you actually can improve your ability to communicate with humans. What do I mean by that? It's kind of counterintuitive. It has long been argued that, these LLMs, they hallucinate, they make stuff up, they don't know what they're talking about. But we as humans do this every day too. Like, we as humans hallucinate every day. We say things confidently, we make things up. We don't really know if it's true. Then, of course, it comes to context. If you are communicating with colleagues, context matters. What you understand in your background is quite different than what I understand and my background. And until we have a shared context, it's very difficult to find a shared understanding. And then perhaps most importantly is if you are delegating work to teams, the ability to write clear and specific specifications. If you get good at that, doing that with LLMs, you can actually improve your ability to delegate work and write specifications for teammates. So I think there's a very interesting application of governance for team morale relative to AI. Now, I generated this with GPT 5.5. We went back and forth with some concepts, and then I chose a concept, we pushed back, and then it created this. And, he says, well, good news, the AI has reached consensus. The bad news is, so have we. And I think we need to be very careful about the tendency within teams of, quickly achieving consensus and losing the ability to disagree and the human skills for begging to defer and having constructive discussion and debate. And if we're not careful, this is the direction that things are going in. So I would again argue, AI adoption, AI productivity, and unleashing the potential of AI has very much more to do with organizational culture and people and team management. And so we need to avoid situations like this. And by the way, the first time it made this, it was all white people in a city that looked like New York. And I said, no, this talk is going to be in Hong Kong. So I'd like this to represent a Hong Kong. And I said there might be some people from ASEAN in the office. So make sure that this is inclusive with ASEAN. And then, of course, this one is not new, but moving to the individual level, what are the threats that we need to prevent against in an AI era from a leadership point of view? And it is the erosion of critical thinking and independent thought. And these tools, because of the speed and the seamless ease at which it processes information, we have situations like this, which can very quickly reduce the tendency to ask questions. And if humans are going to maintain a sense of value in organizations, which I believe they should, and hopefully many of you also believe that, then we need to be governing so that individuals can actually exercise free and independent thought and can question and guard against things like this. So, there are some very concerning trends in terms of the usage of AI and therefore the erosion of critical thinking and intellectual skills. There's been studies done on the reduction in neural activity, which you can see here in terms of those who are using GPTs and LLMs very frequently. So how to govern to prevent this. And then, educational systems, of course, need to adapt, and we cannot tolerate a race to the bottom. This is an indication of the SAT, the college entrance exam in the US, and there's of course similar exams all over the world, but reducing the demands on educational outcomes in line with the digital and AI usage. So if you reference the WEF, they've done a lot of work now in the last several years on future skills. This one was 2024. You can look this up, but many of the top skills that will be in demand are those human skills, right? The analytical thinking, the communication skills, the empathy, the active listening. And this one, I apologize, is a little bit small, but what I want to call your attention to is that while the core skills that are noted for 2030 do include curiosity and lifelong learning, which I fully support, very interestingly, and I've been very critical of this, the WEF actually put reading and writing in the bottom left quadrant, which are like out of focus skills. So I'm not sure how we're going to enhance and preserve critical thinking if reading and writing is in the bottom left quadrant. So let me just finish because I think my time is up. I'm happy to take questions, Mei Lin, if we have any time. Leadership in an era of AI really requires us to rethink what we mean by governance. I would argue we should not be governing solely for the benefit of the technology, the LLMs, and all of the financial interests wrapped up in that. Of course, you must govern to protect data, privacy, consumer interests, etc. But that is not enough. If you're leading a team, if you're leading an organization, I urge you to think, what is the higher level of governing for human good, and how would you put in processes, incentives, decision-making structures in place so that you can at least be on the right side of history when it comes to societal impacts, and you can actively drive team culture and individual outcomes within your organization to preserve human good. So that's where I will finish. Happy to talk more after the session. If you'd like a copy of my little comparative interactive tool with the encyclical and the other policy systems, I'm happy to send that to you. Thank you very much.